Hi there. So today we're going to review the personality quiz project from the App Development with Swift course that Apple provides. It may take a couple of videos to get through this, but for the first part we're going to get everything set up in the UI. Alright, let's head on over. It's going to look like this. The personality quiz is a 3-screened project. So you have a choice, you start the quiz, and then you'll have questions you answer, and then at the end you get a result. So let's start this by going over to Xcode and create a new Xcode project. We're going to choose single view app and choose next, and we'll call this personality quiz, and we'll stay with Swift and we won't use any of these other options. Go ahead and choose next. And then save it to your desktop or wherever you're going to keep track of everything. Alright, let's take a look at the main.storyboard. And the first thing we want to do is add 2 additional view controllers. So if you go to the object library, and here you're going to select a view controller, and we're just going to set it right there. And let's add one more. Click and drag and set it right there. You can give yourself a little more room. Very good. So the first thing we want to do is create the introduction screen, and that'll be our first view controller that's here on the left. And we want to open and find a label and click and drag and set that to the center. And then we're going to add some information. So go over to the inspector, and the text that we want to change this to is, which animal are you? Let's change the font. Go ahead and select the little T icon, and from system font we select that and change it to custom, and then we have a choice of ones we can choose from, and let's go ahead with Georgia. And then the style, it's going to be regular, and then let's change this size to 30. Let's go ahead and add a button. So below this, we're going to add a button. We're going to fix the layout here in a second. So just kind of get things settled. Let's set the button text is going to be begin personality quiz. And we'll just keep the system font as it is. Next, let's highlight both of these items, so you can click and drag to select both of them. And then down here where it says embed in, we're going to select that and say stack view. So that embeds this into a stack view, and from here we can make some adjustments on how things are spaced. So if you go back to our inspector, you'll notice that it says alignment, distribution, and spacing. So for this, the alignment we're going to set to fill, distribution to fill, and spacing we're going to set to 0. And go ahead and press return. So now we're set up that way. At this point, we want to center the stack view that we've created so that it centers on the screen properly. So to do that, we're going to center this by using the alignment tool. So let's select this again. So this is selected, and we're going to go to the alignment tool and click horizontally and vertically in container. Notice these are set to 0. Go ahead and add 2 constraints. Next, let's add some additional images or icons we're going to use to kind of decorate this up a little bit. So from here we're going to add a label. So I'll click the object and we're going to go to label and click and drag, and notice how I've got these constraints when I get up here into the corner. Go ahead and let go of that, and let's set that there. Now we want to change this text, and the way you can change the text, obviously you can go up here and you can edit this, but if we want to change it to an emoji icon, you need to call up the emoji picker, which is a special tool set. So you press Control Command Space, and now it brings up all of the emojis. So let's go ahead and find one we want. These are ones I've already used, so if you haven't found them, you just kind of scroll all the way down to animals. So let's select a little dog. And for the size, we need to change this size so that it's a bit bigger. So go ahead and change this. Actually, we could just change this to 40. All right, now we want to make 3 more of these because we can put them in each corner. So go ahead and while it's selected, press Command C and then Command V to make a copy. Now drag it over here. Notice it's there. Let's go ahead and press Command V again, and let's just get all these outlined, and then we'll update them. Perfect. All right, so in this corner, so notice when I double click, so if I double click in, I can edit, and if I press the Control Command Space, it brings up the picker there as well. So let's go with a cat, and let's go Control Command Space, and let's go with a bunny. And then for this one, Control Command Space. Oops, double click in, Control Command Space. Sorry, I gotta select it. There we go. And let's choose a turtle. There's a turtle. Awesome. Okay, now we need to get these aligned properly. Let's start with this one up in the upper top corner. Here we're going to click the Add New Constraint button, and from here we're setting this. Notice how we've got this set to 0 and 16, so that's, if I add these 2 constraints here, that's where it's already calculated based on the top and the bottom. And notice for the top, because we are at the title bar, the status bar, we're not, it's treated as 0. But on the left, we're 16 pixels from the left. So go ahead and make sure that's the same. So 0 and 16, add 2 constraints. Then for this one, we can add constraints, but we're going to go to the right and the top and click Add 2. Select this bottom on the bottom left. Add 2 constraints. We're going to go from the left and from the bottom. And notice that here it's saying there's 20 pixels from the bottom. So we want that as indicated. Select that one. And there we go. So you see how we're adding constraints to each side and corner based on where we want them to attach to. All right, and you know this is working because if I go here and I switch view, I can change orientation, and then notice my orientation works up, and now they're set up here. And then if I rotate back, they're set up there. All right. Notice up here, it's got this little warning, and you could see it up here where it says, hey, there's a bunch of things, and it's identifying a couple things. One, it's talking about the view controller, and the reason it's complaining there is because right now we just have view controllers sitting in the main storyboard, but they're not actually connected to anything. We'll take care of that later. But notice these other issues, says trailing constraint and issues like that. So to fix that, if I click over here, this is the same thing, and notice it's giving me a summary, and it tells me when I highlight, it's saying, hey, we're missing a bunch of things. If I go ahead and click that, then it says use resizing leading and fixing trailing constraints, or it says used fixed leading and resizing. And there's little reasons why, but just go ahead and go with the recommendation, click confirm, and then select here and do confirm. So it does it automatically for us, so we're good. All right, so that takes care of the warnings. So now we've got the introduction screen set up, but at this point we needed to do something. We have a button, and we needed to do something when we press the button. So we want it to transition from this view controller to this view controller. And so to do that, we can press Control and click on the button and drag to the view controller and let go. And then we choose an action segue, which is show. Now these are connected. Okay, so we're going to take a look at here. This next one would be the question, where we show our questions. And then this third one would be where we show our results. Let's take care of the results screen first because it's a little simpler. The question screen is a little more complex, so we'll take care of that in a second. But we want to, when we have shown a question and they select an answer, we want to transition to the results. Now we're doing something here in this second screen that allows you to have multiple layouts. We're using, depending on a question type, we show different controls of how to answer the question. I'll talk about that here in a second, but the point is that we can also add a transition from one view controller to the next without using a button. We can create a segue. So this right here is a segue. It's a storyboard segue, and this is something that we created from the button to the view controller. We can also create a segue on the view controller so that we can call it in code. So we're going to do that right now. Notice up here we can select that I want to press Control, first hold down Control, and then click and drag from that view controller icon to the next view controller and choose Show. Now notice it says Manual Segue. That's what we're creating here. So we choose and we call that Show. Now when I select this segue, I want to give it an identifier so that we can call this in code. So we're going to call this Results Segue. Segue. I'll spell segue properly. Okay. In the course, in the book, it refers to embedding the view controllers in a navigation controller. Now, I want to share this because this is important to remember, and we'll talk about this in the future as we work on other projects. It says, should all three view controllers be contained in a navigation controller? So right now these are individual self-contained. There's not a relationship between them except for a segue. A navigation controller allows you to add a hierarchy to the views so that you get a back button, things like that. So what it's saying is, remember that a modal presentation is the right choice whenever the context of your app will change. And it's a context shift when the player transitions from the introduction screen to the question screen. That means that the first view controller should modally present a view controller contained in a navigation controller. Select the second view controller, then choose Editor, Embed, Navigation Controller from the Xcode. Okay, so what we're saying is, because we're transitioning, we want to embed this in a navigation controller. So to do that, we select the second view controller and we go to Editor and we choose Embed In and we say Navigation Controller. Now what we have is we go from the introduction screen to a navigation controller, and notice it added this second kind of representation, and then here's our question screen. It just kind of moved over. So, and then here's our results screen. Now what that does is it gives us the ability to go from the quiz to the results and back to the questions again, so we can go back and forth. Now let's take a look at the results screen and let's set that up. Notice it added the back button now that it's been embedded in the navigation controller. We can also add other buttons, and let's finish off this results screen. So first we want to drag a navigation item, and you can scroll down and look for navigation item and click and drag and set it up here at the top. And here we have the title. We can change that title to results. Next we can add a done button, and to do that we go back and we're looking for a bar button item. So go ahead and select that and then release, and let's change this. You can change this manually. You can change it to, or you can use some pre-made buttons, and we want to set this to a pre-made button to done. Now let's add a couple of labels, and click and drag. Let's drag two of them. For this top label, let's change the size. We're going to set this up to be system font of 50. And for the second one, we want it to be system font of 17, so we'll leave that. Let's embed both of these into a stack view. So go ahead and select embed and then choose stack view. And for this, we want to set this, make sure, so it says vertical, and then set this to fill, and distribution to fill. We want to select the label and set the alignment to centered, and set that one to centered as well. Select the view stack and let's add some constraints. So we want to set this, what we're doing is we are adding constraints to the left and the right. And so here, remember our margin was 16 pixels and then 16 pixels here. Go ahead and click add to constraints. So what that does is it sets up the label to be as wide as the device, whatever the device is, up to 16 pixels on each size. Then we can also, with this selected, set this to vertically in container to align vertically. So that handles that. So notice it was red and now it went away. So now all the constraints are satisfied. One other thing for this second label, so I've selected the second label, we need to change this. So if we set lines to 0, that means you can have multiple lines. And then if we set the word wrap, so line break, set it to word wrap. So if this will show up with multiple descriptions. So as a part of your results, you'll get a longer description on this second label. So in order to handle that, we're saying we can have multiple lines and we want them to do word wrap for the line break. Okay, so we've got these three view controllers set up somewhat. We're going to get back to the question view controller here in a minute. But for now, we have the view controller, but we need the view controller class that is associated with each one of these views. So right now, note that we have a view controller, and that is, if I go back to main storyboard, if you notice that this view controller, I can move this over, give ourselves a little more room. So this is tied to the view controller class, and these other two views don't have a view controller class yet. So let's create these class files now by going and let's choose we're going to right click over the folder and choose new file, and then I want Cocoa Touch class and choose next, and then we're going to give this a name. First, if we set the subclass for this, what I want is a UI view controller. Notice what it does is it adds the view controller name there. We're going to prefix that with, we're going to say question view controller. So this is a standard that helps us keep track of the Swift files that are specifically tied to a view controller, so it's pretty easy to keep track of. Go ahead and make sure it says language is Swift and choose next. And here we're just saving it within the folder and the target is already selected, so go ahead and choose create. All right, let's do one more. So I want to right click and choose new file, Cocoa Touch class, choose next, and it's remembered what we've done before. So for this one, we're going to say results view controller. Go ahead and choose next, and again it's saved and selected. Let's make one more change while we're here. Notice our view controller, which is for the first introduction view controller. Let's rename this. So you can just, either double click into it and then just say introduction. Whoops, introduction. I can spell, I promise. Introduction view controller. Make sure we spell that right. And then let's change this name here, introduction. Make sure that is saved. So I just press Command S to save that. Okay, let's go back to our main.storyboard. And we need to update these view controllers so that they point to the correct base class. So if I select this class here, if I select the view controller at the top and then I come over to my, what is that? That's the identity inspector. Then I can select this and I can choose the class, and if I start typing, it should bring it up and autocomplete for us. Let's go to the next class. Notice it's this view controller here, which is our questions. And so here we don't have a class associated yet, so we're going to call this question. And so notice how it auto-completed for me. And then I'm going to select the results, and I want to say results, and there is that. So I just press tab to complete that. Okay, we're ready to create the question view controller and add all the different types that we're going to use. So the personality quiz uses 4 different types of questions, and based on the type of question, we're going to show a list of controls that we're going to use. So the first one is, for example, a single answer question. So to do that, let's start by creating a vertical stack view. So let's go to the object library, and notice how you have these objects you can click and drag and set them out. So let's click vertical stack and drop that right here. Then we're going to add 4 buttons. So go ahead and select the object library and scroll to button and click, and we're going to say 1 button and 2 button, 3 button. This is exciting, isn't it? And 4 button. So now we have 4 buttons. Now let's change this up so it looks a little better. So first, let's align this. So we select, if I just select this stack view and then I align it vertically, so I click vertically in container and select that, and then while it's still selected, I choose add new constraints, and I'm going to constrain these to the left and the right. Remember, we've done this already, so I want to set this at 16 and 16 and add 2 constraints. So now it fills the spot. Now we want to add some spacing. Notice they're kind of grouped really close. With the stack view still selected, let's go back to our, what is this one called? This is called, oh come on, Attributes Inspector. That's what we want, Attributes Inspector. And notice the spacing, so let's give ourselves a little spacing, and let's set this to 20. Perfect. So that sets up for our single answer question. The next one is a multiple answer question. So to handle that, we're going to create a new stack and add some more controls. What we'll do first, though, is we can hide this and make it invisible to our layout so that we can continue to build things here without it getting in the way. Notice with this selected over here, and I'm again in the Attributes Inspector, notice this says installed. If I uncheck installed, notice what happens. It's hidden. And if you look over here in the hierarchy view, you'll notice that it's grayed out because it's hidden. And now I can drag things around and I can do stuff because there's nothing visibly on the screen. Okay, let's start by creating a label and a switch. So let's grab a label and a switch, and we're going to select both of them, and then we're going to embed them this time in a stack view. And notice how it automatically detected that the stack view was horizontal. Notice that? So if you look at the stack view, it says horizontal. See, if I had placed them one on top of the other, it would have automatically chosen vertical, which is nice. So notice how it did this for us. We like that. Okay, so with this selected, we want to just select the whole thing. We're going to press Command C and Command V. We're going to make 4 copies of this. Press Command V again, and Command V again. Next, we're going to select all of them. So notice they're all selected, and we're going to embed in a stack view. And guess what? Now, notice how it chose to do them vertically, which is what we want. Let's select this and make sure we got these set up right. Let's set the spacing to 20. And next, let's add one more item to this stack view. Let's add a button. So I'm going to click and drag and add a button to the bottom. Notice that I'm within the stack view. So right now I'm in the main stack view, which is what I want. If I get too close, then all of a sudden it adds it to the kind of the child stack view. We don't want that. We want it to be right there. Notice that line at the bottom. So go ahead and let go. Very good. Next, let's go ahead and set this up. So I've just selected the whole thing, and let's do what we've done already, which is vertically align, and then add trailing and leading and trailing constraints, 16 on both sides, and click Add to Constraints. Let's change the title of this button, and you can just double click right into it and type, and we'll call it Submit Answer. Okay, so that takes care of the second question type. Now the third question type, and I realized I had said there were 4, sorry, there's only 3. You could probably make up another question type if you wanted, but for our purposes, based on the course that Apple provides, there's only 3. Okay, so remember we can hide this. So if I've selected it, and then again I have my attributes editor, if I uncheck installed, then notice how it disappears and I can continue working. Okay, let's make another question type, and this one is going to be a range question where you have a slider. So let's start by adding some labels. Let's click and drag a couple of labels out here. And let's add the 2 labels, and let's put them side by side like this, and then select them both, and we're going to embed in a stack view. So now we have the horizontal stack view. Then I'm going to drag out, I'm just looking at my notes here, let's drag a slider. So we have a slider, and we're going to place this slider above these, and we're going to select everything and then embed in a stack view. So it looks like that. And then we're going to add a button underneath. And it's going to be in the bottom of the stack view like that. With this selected, let's just check out the spacing, and it wants us to do 20. So let's just change that to 20. Gives it a little more space. Let's change this name of the button. I'm going to double click into this, and we're going to call this, the title is Submit Answer. And let's do the same thing we've done, which is align this. And so let's, with the stack view selected, we're going to say vertically, align vertically in center. And then we're going to add, guess what? Leading and trailing. Add 2 constraints. So we have set up this third question type. Next, before we go on, we want to enable these other stack views. So notice here they're grayed out. So if I select that and I choose the installed, it'll become available. And then if I select this one, I choose installed. And the reason you need to have that enabled is so that when you reference them in code, they'll be available. Otherwise, they're basically hidden and won't render. So that's where we use installed. To finish out the question view, we need to add a label that indicates what the question is. Here what we've done is we've selected the controls for the type of answers they can provide. So let's go ahead and select a label and drag that out to the top, and we're going to give this, let's constrain it first. Go down here to add constraints, and from here we're going to set this to 20 from the top, and we want this 16. Notice when you modify the number that it automatically selects this constraint for you. So when I modify this, notice how it selected that for us. It's pretty helpful. Go ahead and click Add 3 Constraints. Now for the type of label, let's set the alignment to center, and let's change the system font to 30. And let's change this lines to 0 because we could have multiple lines, and then line break as word wrap. Next, as part of our questions, we're going to show a progress bar to indicate how many questions or where they are in relation to finishing the quiz. So to do that, we can use what is called a progress view. So if I go back to my object library and notice we have progress view, so I can click and drag and set that towards the bottom. And then we're going to add the following constraints. So while that's selected, we want to add constraints. And at the bottom, we're going to say 20 pixels from the bottom, and then 16 from the left and 16 from the right. Click Add 3 Constraints. All right, so we have everything set up for the view controllers. We've got all the UI. Now we're going to take a break because this video is getting kind of long, and we're going to, in the next video, add all of the code for this app. So be sure to subscribe and look for the next video. Thank you.